He was a narrow man with a long face and strict ideas about law and order. He and Adam had butted heads more than once.
"It is published in the papers," said Townsend. "One of their numbers saw the notice."
"Surely," said Adam, "the first thing we do is make sure that this Haydn is telling the truth. Where can we find him?" But apparently, His Grace had neglected to ask that. Haydn had delivered his warning and disappeared. He thought, however, that Haydn could be one of the cowmen who pastured their animals on the green. The argument over how to proceed lasted half an hour. Gautier and Sam Taunton agreed with Adam that they needed to find Haydn and make sure this report was accurate. Lavender, on the other hand, argued that they couldn't waste the time.
"If we hesitate, we could wake up to a revolution in the streets. We need to arrest these men at once. It'll be safer all around."
Townsend had agreed with Lavender, but Adam stood his ground. "If it turns out this report is a mistake or madness, Bow Street will look like fools," he said. "And when the newspapers get hold of it, they will mock His Grace and us for jumping at shadows." The argument worked, at least in part. Townsend saw it as his duty to protect Bow Street's reputation as well as the King's peace. So he reluctantly agreed to allow Adam to find out what he could. However, he also declared no men would be spared for the mission. Adam was entirely on his own. Now, standing in the cold and the dark, Adam had to admit something was happening in that hayloft. But if it was some dread and murderous conspiracy, the participants were remarkably sloppy. The man he'd sent to the stable door to test the waters had walked right in, and that was over 2 hours ago. Adam had heard no sounds of a struggle or other commotion. In fact, all he heard now was the rhythmic call of the watch. "2 of the clock and all's well! 2 of the clock and all's well!" Christ, I hope it is. Adam let his breath out slowly. The vapour rose in front of his eyes, shining silver in the moonlight. The plan was not anywhere near as strong as he'd have liked, but they had no time to come up with anything better. The ministerial dinner was in 2 days. At least it would have been if it had not already been cancelled. This particular turn of events, however, had not been reported to the newspapers. The watchman's call faded away. Adam waited, measuring time by the beating of his heart, the shadows passing this way and that in the hayloft, and the slow deadening of all sensation in his toes and fingertips. At last, the stable door dragged itself open. Adam willed himself to stillness. His eyes had adapted well enough to the dark that he could make out the shadow of a tall, lean man as he slipped from the darkness. The man glanced at the sky to gauge the weather. Then he hunched his back against the knife-edged wind that sliced through the alley and scurried away. Adam gave himself a count of 30 to see if anyone else would emerge to follow this man, but the stable door remained closed. Upstairs, the erratic shadows moved back and forth, just as before. No shout rose. Adam pulled his hat brim lower, stuffed his hands into his pockets, and set off after the tall man. Out on the main street, he passed the doorway where Gautier kept watch and turned his collar up. That was the signal they'd agreed to. All was indeed well. He would meet them back at Bow Street. Townsend had not authorised any men to assist Adam in his vigil. Gautier and Townsend had insisted on coming along anyway. At least, if they were asked, they could truthfully say they had never gone into the alley. The further the tall man walked from Cato Street, the easier he moved. By the time he'd gone a quarter of a mile, his conspirator's scuttle had changed to the easy, swinging gait of a man without a care in the world. When the man reached the dappled mare carriage house, he rapped on the door. After a long moment, that door opened, and a boy emerged carrying a lantern. The man handed the boy a few coins and sent him running toward the stables. Some moments later, an enclosed carriage drawn by a pair of matched chestnuts was driven up to the door. The tall man climbed inside, but left the carriage door open. Adam took a last look about himself. Satisfied that he was not followed, he crossed the cobbles, climbed into the carriage, and latched the door.